What's up everybody and welcome to the channel. So in today's video, we are gonna take a look at the legendary Lamborghini Huracan. I'm here at 704 Exotics. They have this really nice 2015 Huracan for today's video. Check out their website, linked down below. But today's video, we're gonna do the ultimate buyer's guide on the Huracan now that it is discontinued. This ran for around 10 years. The Temerario has taken its place, and this is the last Lamborghini with that big naturally aspirated 10-cylinder. So let's get right into everything that the Lamborghini Huracan had to offer. It ran from a 2015 model year up to the 2024 model year, and it was a fantastic car and still a great buy now on the used market. Now for all the Lamborghini Huracans, they're gonna be featuring a naturally aspirated 5.2 liter 10-cylinder motor. They are available in rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, and they're all gonna have the same 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. Horsepower also ranges from 580 going up to around 630 horsepower, and 0 to 60 is gonna come in the mid 2-second range. So now let's get into all the different versions of the Lamborghini Huracan. So starting off, you're gonna see LP 580-2s as well as LP 610-4s. Those are gonna be the first generations, 2015s going up to 2019s. Those are available also in convertibles and coupe form. And then the Dash 2 obviously means rear-wheel drive. Dash 4s, like today's car, it means all-wheel drive. Now, within the first generation, you're also gonna get the Huracan Performante. That was an all-wheel drive version. It weighed around 80 pounds less than the standard all-wheel drive coupe. That one's gonna feature the same engine, however, cranked up horsepower to around 630. You could get that in coupe and convertible form, and that was basically the lighter, faster version of the standard first generation Huracans. Had the ALA system, which is basically the active aerodynamics, the big wing, carbon on the inside and out, just a much more track-focused version. Then we move on to 2020, which was the second generation Huracan called the Evo. So once again, they were available in rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. They ditched the LP names and it was just Evo rear-wheel drive, Evo all-wheel drive. So those cars had a little bit updated design for the front and rear bumpers, and then the interior got a nice multimedia screen. You could get bucket seats available. With that, the car now had 630 horsepower. So a lot of the power from the old Performante into the standard Huracan. Now with the Evo, they made 3 versions of that were more the special editions. They had the STO, which stands for Super Trofeo Omologato. I don't know if my pronunciation is correct, but basically that was a homologated race car for the most part for the roads. Basically the replacement for the Performante. However, this time around, they went to an insane level. Full carbon fiber body panels. The whole front end was called the Cofango. So the front bumper, the trunk cover, the fenders was all one piece, a big clamshell that opened forward. I don't even want to begin to know how much that would cost if you damaged it. But the STO was insanely track focused. Hopefully owners of that actually use it on the track, because from what I've heard, on the road, it is a pretty brutal ride. That car had 50% more downforce than the Performante, and it was rear-wheel drive only, weighing in around 3,200 pounds. Next up, we get the Technica. So that car kind of came out because the STO is honestly too harsh, and a lot of buyers simply weren't actually gonna be driving it on the road. It was more hardcore, it had the extra power, the aerodynamics, all that good stuff, but it was still toned down enough to actually be livable out on the road. So that one had a really cool design, kind of their final edition send-off for this. That was also a rear-wheel drive car. And then the craziest Huracan they made was the Storado. That was an off-road focused car. Had about a 1.5-inch lift over the standard car. It was all-wheel drive. It had wide fender flares, rally lights, a roof rack, and honestly, people love that car. On the road, the suspension allowed it to be comfortable. It was actually smoother and more livable from the day-to-day. So it was an off-road Huracan that was great for the street, and if you had some light trails or a dirt track or something, a few owners have had some fun doing donuts in the dirt and actually using it on trails. Now for the interiors with the Huracans, the first generation car is what we're looking at today. Now the center stack is going to be the biggest difference between this one and the second gen. This does have a lot of the basic Audi controls in it that we've seen on Audi products from the past. So if you look up top, you're going to get climate controls. We basically toggle what you want, and it comes up on this little screen. So we have fan speed, you can now see your zones. We have heated seats that just have the little lights. You have AC, defrost, auto, things like that. When that is off, you're gonna get some basic information like what you saw in the Gallardo. We're gonna have the oil, you also have oil temperature as well as the battery. Underneath that, we kind of have the multimedia stuff with the screen in the center gauge cluster. So it's kind of a configurable design where it's all in the center. We have radio media, different rotary dial controls, info, back, car, and you're gonna see all that come up on the center screen. So overall, it's really not that difficult to get used to if you're used to Audis. With that, on the main screen, you have your different drive modes. When you control this toggle down, it will change the gauge cluster just a little bit. It's not all too drastic in the changes. You're gonna get obviously leather, a couple bits of Alcantara throughout the interior. Some cars will have cup holders that pop out of the passenger side. We have a glove box, there's a center console. We even have a plug to where you can plug in your phone, and then certain cars will have like CarPlay and things like that. This one even has a CD player in the back. One thing cool, they introduced this cool start button with this little fighter jet flap, and a lot of them will have an opening to where you can actually just put your finger right through the hole rather than having to open that up every single time, like we saw on the Aventador. There is storage underneath this column too, and overall it's a pretty nice interior. These basic seats are actually really comfortable. They're power operated. 2015 model years are not gonna have cruise control. From what I've seen, I think in the US market, 2017 and up got cruise control. However, we do have the blank switches. We are gonna get some controls for the screen. We have our turn signals on the steering wheel, our high beam flash, windshield wipers are on the steering wheel as well. Then you have the massive paddle shifters. Comfortable armrests, mirror controls are on the door panel, and then a nice release handle. So overall, it's a pretty well appointed interior. On the second gen car, so all the Evos, this center design has changed to a screen. And honestly, I think it looks really good. I think it works pretty easy. Not everybody is the biggest fan of that screen. However, I think it does make the car look really modern on the interior. And for the gauge cluster, especially in Corsa mode, you now get kind of the SVJ style screen where you get the massive tack. So for me, the Evo generation just brought it up to the modern times enough to, in my opinion, make it be perfect. Moving on to reliability and maintenance. One of the absolute greatest things with the Huracan is the fact that this is one of the not only most reliable supercars, one of the most reliable cars in general. It is not uncommon to see one with 100,000 miles that has only ever had an annual basic oil change. There are a lot of companies that do rentals of exotics, and the Huracans, they don't skip a beat. You can just beat on them. There's people who twin turbo them, supercharge them, beat the absolute crap out of these Huracans, and they just don't break down. They are just super, super good. Owners don't have major complaints. However, now that we are getting to 10 years on these first year ones, you might see a couple little things here and there, maybe a sensor or two wearing out, but honestly, people just haven't seen drastic issues with these cars. An annual oil change, I do it on my own Gallardo. It's less than 150 bucks. I can do it myself. This is the same engine, should be the exact same thing. Maybe every 10 years do a transmission flush, differential flushes, things like that. And that's basically all you're going to have to do. So with that pricing, now that these are all in the used market, what are you going to expect to pay? If you look at a first generation car like this, ranging from maybe 40,000 miles down to showroom miles, the prices is gonna be around $160,000 to $215,000. So there are quite a few really good ones under 200 grand nowadays. On top of that, if you bump it up to the Performante, you're gonna find those going for around $270,000 to $350,000, depending on the mileage once again. Now for the Evos, you can find them from 225 up to 350 grand, depending on miles. However, it seems like most are gonna be mid to low 200s. Seems kind of crazy to ask more than that for showroom condition. These cars are so reliable, mileage really shouldn't scare you. And honestly, I would go for a little bit higher mileage Huracan to save the money, because you know you're not gonna have issues with it as long as the leathers are in good condition. It's about all you gotta take into consideration, make sure it's actually been treated well. But I would go for the higher mileage ones just because they're so rock solid. The STO model is gonna go for around 330 to 420, and then both the Technica and Sterrato are kind of holding the similar price points. You can find most of those for around $300,000 to $350,000. So overall, 150 to 450 grand is where you're gonna find the Huracans these days. My opinion, a Huracan Evo rear-wheel drive for around 220, I think is the sweet spot. You get the newest car, in my opinion, the best looking Huracan they ever made, and it's not that crazy in comparison to the higher price. However, to get a more simple LP580, LP610 for well under 200, that is a heck of a car for the money. This one, low mileage, around 200 grand for an all-wheel drive LP. Once again, an amazing car for the price. So what can you expect when you're driving in a Huracan? So with this car, I'm just in automatic Strata mode. This is your basic default drive setting. Honestly, it's pretty normal to drive. The suspension is pretty smooth, going slowly. The transmission is really, really nice and smooth. Gear changes are seamless. It's just a pretty normal car to drive. When you take your foot off the brake, it'll start to creep forward. So it's fairly simple. The view around might be a little bit to get used to. You have that long windshield, very low windows. However, front visibility is really good. The mirrors do a good job. Over your right shoulder, you have a big blind spot there. That whole area over the engine is a lot bigger than you might expect. So It's a little bit getting used to the visibility, but honestly, you know, the more you drive it, you kind of get used to it. Turn signals on the steering wheel are also a little interesting to get used to. However, over your left shoulder, that window is so big, you really do have a great view for being a mid-engine car. So normal driving, you know, it's pretty comfortable. I'm 5'11". I have a couple inches of headroom, legroom, and recline and everything are pretty good. So honestly, really can't complain. This could be your daily driver. Not many people are probably doing that. However, you could literally drive this every day, and it is easy and normal where you can almost forget about that you are in a supercar. It still looks crazy in here, and obviously if you put the throttle down, you're gonna be moving. So I like how they have made this super livable, and that's probably why these have sold so well and are just such good cars that hold their value really nicely. When you start toggling your drive modes, sport mode, we downshift to 5th gear, still in automatic mode, the car's gonna be a lot more aggressive. We can go into manual mode, take that control with those paddle shifters, and then of course Corsa mode will further the traction control and engine tuning and all that to make this even more aggressive. So if we just leave it into sport mode, which is a pretty good streetable mode, we can start feeling out the performance. The steering definitely has got a little bit heavier as we get into the sharp drive mode. And then with the transmission now, it is crazy how instant it makes shifts, and those brakes really bite hard whenever you tap them. And then when we start to push the car a little bit harder, the response you get the exhaust cracks are pretty wild, and the way this car reacts to everything you do is what I am loving about this car already. It's been a while since I've been able to drive one. You hit the paddle, you're in the next gear, you're ready to go. You hit the throttle, the great thing about a naturally aspirated V10 is there is power all the time, and it is incredibly smooth. It is so flat in the turns, avoiding things in the road. I mean, it handles like an absolute go-kart. Now in sport mode, you don't feel the gear changes at all, which I kind of like that. So let's go ahead and pop it into Corsa mode, the full-on drive mode. You can really just tell the whole car is so incredibly stiff. All right, so that is what I'm kind of used to, that little kick in the back. Every gear change, Corsa mode, it wakes it up to add that drama that I want in a Lamborghini. All right, Corsa, that's where it's at when you want the extra drama. Gosh, hitting bumps, this thing is super tight in every way. But I really do like the configurations, how the drive modes do so much. We're back into Strada, and the car tones down so much, and especially if you get into the Huracan Evos, which have even better suspension upgrades and things like that, that car really gets refined to a whole new level. And the performance and precision can be even more depending on what trim you go with, especially if you get into a Technica. So I'm liking the split personality. The steering in Strada is pretty comfortable. It's still very direct. Like, you don't really forget you're in a Lambo, quite honestly. Back into Corsa. It is so quick to make shifts. And the aggressive nature. This car comes alive, man. This thing is fun. This thing is really fun. You just can do so much in a Huracan. I don't think there's anything drastic about it that a buyer may not like. I think if you're looking for a supercar, this is the one that can do a lot. Storage isn't the greatest. You know, the front trunk is like 4 cubic feet. However, with my own car, my brother's Audi R8, which all are kind of similar, you can still fit some groceries in there, backpacks. It's a livable car. And it offers so much fun. I don't think you can mind this car. It is just a blast. So ending thoughts with the Lamborghini Huracan, would I recommend buying this? Absolutely. I think it goes without saying this is one of the best supercars for the money. It'll compete with maybe a Ferrari 458, a 488, McLaren 570S, McLaren 650S. However, this is rock solid reliable. You have an amazing V10 that doesn't exist anymore, and it's a car you can honestly maintain yourself. There's a lot of Audi in it, so it's an Audi engine, a lot of Audi electronics, which really make this car super simple. And to me, spending a lot of money on a car to have the simplicity of just Audi underneath, but with all the flair of a Lamborghini, makes this, in my opinion, the best bang for the buck supercar you can buy, with a price range to fit, honestly, quite a large spectrum. Some general things to look out for. Obviously, now we're getting to 10-year-old cars. 2015 is a 10-year-old car now, which is kind of crazy to think. General wear and tear, maintenance things, make sure it's been good enough maintained. You're not necessarily always going to find one that has perfect annual servicing year after year for a decade. However, these cars, like I said, are pretty reliable to where as long as it has good enough maintenance history, do a once over, have it checked out. As long as nothing's leaking, which I highly doubt you'll even find issues with a used one, give it a good once over and you should be good to go. But there is the Lamborghini Huracan. They made around 25,000 of these, roughly. We don't know exact numbers on them, but definitely a great car to go with, and a ton are out there. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, stay tuned for plenty more content, and check out 704 Exotics. They have this insane car for today's video, and they have a lot of really nice cars as well. So check out their website, linked below, and I'll see you all in the next video.